So after about 30 odd years, Mad Max returns in George Miller's Mad Max Fury Road. This is a film that, despite all the critical praise it was getting, I was sort of cautiously optimistic rather than excited before it came out. That was until I saw the trailer and saw a shot of a guy playing a guitar with flames shooting out of the end of it, and as soon as I saw that I thought, yes, give me that, that is what I want. So my anticipation levels immediately sort of leapt up for Mad Max Fury Road, and I have to say that I absolutely loved this film. Now, I know that's probably what most people who've reviewed this have said, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to talk about it for a little bit. So the plot basically follows Max, played this time by Tom Hardy. He's assuming the mantle from Mel Gibson, who is helping a woman called Furiosa, played by Charlize Theron, escape from a bad guy called Immortan Joe, who is basically chasing her for reasons that I won't divulge here, because, to be honest, it'd be quite nice to go into this film cold if you know nothing about the plot. So basically, Max is helping Furiosa escape from Immortan Joe, who is chasing them across the desert with hordes of what they call war boys, which are sort of semi-mutated people, and that do his bidding, one of which is played by Nicholas Hoult from X-Men Days of Future Past. He's been in quite a few things, who we have glanced in the trailers. So that's the basic setup of the film. Now, the things that this film does right: the action is pretty astounding. Not since The Raid and The Raid 2 have I watched a modern action movie and said to myself, you know, that has shown me things I've not seen before. Not only does it feel fresh and energetic, and this is coming from like a 70-year-old filmmaker who made this franchise 30 years ago and then disappeared to do like one of the Babe movies and Happy Feet and some animated movies, you know. So not only does it feel like fresh and energetic, but it also feels quite classic. You will find very little, if any, shaky cam in this. The way the action is set up, you know, George Miller takes care to establish where all the characters are in relation to each other during an action scene, and the film is basically one 2-hour-long chase scene with a few little areas of respite here and there, but he takes the time to make sure the motivations are clear. So for each action beat, you know, the character motivations are clear, so you're never lost in terms of plot or sort of geometry between the characters. And that is something that, when you see how insane the action is in this film, which you glance in the trailers, it's really a sight to behold, and it's quite remarkable, a remarkable feat really, that George Miller managed to do that. So the action's incredible. It relies almost solely on practical effects. There is one big CGI sequence with a fire tornado, which, you know, just right there is amazing. You know, just the words fire tornado sound like they belong with each other. But also, I've read in interviews since that the only real CG used was to remove like stunt rigging from shots and to expand the landscape around them. So most of the action is practical and done with stuntmen and whatnot, and it is just absolutely phenomenal. It feels tangible, it feels real, you feel like people were in danger making this movie for your entertainment. And for most of the film, you know, you're watching it with your hands and fingernails digging into your armrests. It's fantastic action. The character work is really good as well. Now, Tom Hardy does play Max a little bit differently to Mel Gibson. I feel like his mental deterioration is a lot more apparent in this movie than it was in any of the others, and that's something that I quite liked. And also, it's not reliant on the audience having seen the other 3 movies. The continuity of the Mad Max series has always been a little bit murky, and it never overtly states where this film takes place in the series of 4. You know, it could be after The Road Warrior, it could be after Thunderdome. It never really says where it is. And also, any backstory that you do need, and there is very little, is told through flashbacks. The film is not too concerned with getting you up to speed, because George Miller seems to know that this is just a 2-hour chase scene and that's all we're here for. But having said that, the character work, especially Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, who is the standout in this movie really does belong to her in a lot of ways, is great. All that stuff's fantastic. People have criticised that Max doesn't have many lines or an awful lot of agency in the sort of first act of the film, but that's something that I quite liked. It manages to sort of move him to one side to introduce these new characters, all of whom are very interesting, and I quite liked that. I liked this sort of the subversion of certain action movie cliches, you know, where only the male characters have agency. And that brings me to what makes the film special to me, is the level of feminism in it. Now, you've no doubt read, if you've read anything about this film online, that it is a very feminist film. It doesn't quite go full feminist, but it gets pretty damn close, and that's something that I really appreciated. Those are the sorts of movies I try to seek out when watching. And it's something that really spoke to me, and that's the reason. And I actually had to rewatch the first 2 Mad Max movies before I could make this declaration, but that's the reason that Fury Road is actually my favourite of the Mad Max series. Yes, I prefer it to The Road Warrior, and it is due to those feminist themes. They are themes that are important to me, and those are what make it an action film. Those are what makes it transcend the genre, you know. Those are what makes it a future classic, and that I loved. That's not to say the film is without its flaws, however. It is 2 hours long, and it could have done to be 90 minutes. Now, I understand why they made it 2 hours. They no doubt wanted the audience to feel the fatigue that the characters were feeling throughout the chase, but it does, the sort of where the second act meets the third, the transition, it does slow down somewhat and it does start to drag, but that's not to say that I didn't love every minute of it. But the way it is at the moment, with it being 2 hours long, you do leave the theatre feeling exhausted, and that's no doubt what George Miller was going for. Does it necessarily work completely? No, it doesn't, but it's pretty damn close to a perfect action film. That serves to highlight my sort of second criticism, where it's possibly sort of one set piece too long. You know, there are a couple of moments where the set pieces feel a little bit repetitive, but again, I feel like that's intentional. In putting us in the characters' shoes. You know, they're on the run from this Immortan Joe and his war boys, constantly being attacked, so I don't doubt that that was intentional, but again, part of me was thinking, you know, this would have worked better as a quick and dirty 90-minute, you know, quick in and out action movie, with sort of more themes to it and stuff. But as it stands, it is a great watch. It's definitely one of the best films I've seen this year so far. I hope it does really well at the box office so that we can see the planned sequels that George Miller has in his back pocket. You know, that would be very interesting. I would recommend it to anybody sort of looking for an action movie, because, you know, I enjoyed Furious 7. That's a franchise that is a bit of a guilty pleasure for me, but I do think they do action quite well. But you forget what it's like to see just action done for real with practical effects, and Mad Max Fury Road is one of those movies that is so good in its genre that it makes everything else around it look worse. It actually steals the thunder of other action movies. It is that good. I can't really praise it enough, and as I say, you know, there are a couple of quibbles here and there, but while you're sat watching this, you will be gripping your seat and you will have a smile on your face all the way through. You will not be thinking of any criticisms. You know, it's only once you leave the theatre and you start to think about it, well, you know, you could have lost this bit, you could have lost that bit. It's a great film. I highly recommend Mad Max Fury Road, one of the best action films in years.